Hello, everyone. We are live on tonight's special live show from the Cultured Nerd Podcast. This is our special spoiler podcast for The Batman. Thank you all for joining us, and let us begin as we dive deep into the movie that we just recently watched, what spoilers that we loved about it, what we didn't like, then we talk about the future and what they've teased already in the last couple days. So here we go. So cool. All right. Well, let's talk the Batman.
I would like to first off say that I have not enjoyed the movie-going experience in a real long time. And that's true before COVID. I can't handle other people's hype trains when you let it all out at this time. I'm going to say that Thursday night at 8 o'clock was the best viewing of a new movie I've had in a very long time. There was very few kids that were there. The kids that were there wanted to see the Batman. Maybe this skewed a little bit older, but I love that opening night of a movie is now considered Wednesday of that week. I way prefer seeing a movie that early in the week.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it on Thursday night with my wife, my son, and my brother-in-law, our other son. You know,
Sure.
He was the boy that we took custody of when he was 12, and now he's like the adult that's like formally a dependent on our taxes.
Sure.
I took them. Brian, my son, he loved it to death. He was just like all in, and then the entire time we're watching it, Steph was just like, "Oh my god, this thing is like I was not ready for this." But let's get right into it. I mean,
I didn't relax. I feel like I have been. There's so many movies, and you can't tell by the trailer the quality of the movie. I felt like I was for the first 20 or 30 minutes. I'm like, when is this movie going to shit the bed? I'm just waiting for something to happen, and it never happened. And the slow burn got better and better and better over time, and it introduces all these themes. Once I got into the movie, boy, what a fun dark world you're in.
Oh yeah. I mean, this movie, it kind of catches you off guard, and I think we talked about. You went like full on dark.
I'm so I changed the brightness on my screen. I gotta turn a light on. I can't be Mr. Vengeance the whole time. Here, that's better.
Let me see if I can drop mine a little bit.
Yeah, you could be Vengeance too.
Ooh, brighter.
Yeah, you
don't want that.
It's exactly what we should be doing on a live show. This is exactly what the people
fiddling with our lights. There we go.
Darkness,
vengeance.
But
no, I loved how they started the movie off with like the Long Halloween-esque monologue where he's just like, I am the shadows, like that whole sequence with like the taggers that were spray painting on Wall Street, and you had like the people that were totally like the muggers and stuff. And I loved how like as soon as the signal hits the sky, they were all just like, holy crap, he could be in any corner. And like they would all stop and look at the shadows, and you're like it had this like almost sense of like the Michael Myers kind of a vibe to it, where he's just like, he could be anywhere and he's gonna get you.
I'll take it one step back. That energy change of I'm assuming that all movies are uniform. You saw that DC thing where we saw all the fun, right? All the new DC movies, the Flash movie, and Aquaman's coming. And then you see, right? It then says DC Entertainment, The Batman, and we're into the movie. And already you're seeing creepy binoculars look at somebody, which is something that Batman does. So you're unsure of, are we going to go after? Is this guy a bad guy? No. We're now the murderer, which also feels again like Batman, that he is the scariest boogeyman. He is the scariest Baba Yaga. You know what I mean? He knows what the creepers do because he also does it to the creepers.
And I got to say though, I think the introduction to Riddler was probably like right when I realized this movie was going to be really good. Just like how he was hiding in the shadows, and then the mayor just moves out of the way and he's just kind of like there. You see his glasses reflecting the TV. I think that was a really wonderful shot, and that's like so early into the movie, and I knew right away that that's going to be something special.
And that it was so slow and quiet and taking its time. You know, there was they conveyed so much information in that scene. You know, we see his mayoral victory on the wall in the newspaper clipping, right? We didn't have to have that scene where they go in movies where it goes, the mayor's really stressed right now. He's 3 points down in the polls. Listen, I don't know what he wants to do. He wants to be alone. The movie was I love that the movie talked up to us as the audience, that it brought us along for all of these things. I also didn't go too far into looking into this movie before it came out. Oh boy, is that Batman song a banger. And not a banger the way that other songs are. That lullaby just brings you in, and every time you're there, it hits in that monologue when we're seeing the kids terrified of what's in the shadows, and then he does come out. These are my notes on the Batman theme song. Tell me if you agree. It's a little bit like the Undertaker from WrestleMania, right? Like it's a little Undertaker-y, like he's gonna get you. Absolutely, there's that funeral march, like that's very clear and present. But at the very beginning of the song, there's kind of a whistle that you kind of hear in like gunslinger movies, almost like both of us are gonna enter this duel, only one of us leaves. And then, even though the song is dark, the only part of the song that's really dark is that first part, because the rest of the song feels really hopeful. You know what I mean? There's that really pretty vibe that kind of goes throughout. And it's the fact that they were able to pack all of those different things into a 15-second clip, that when you hear that bum, bum, you're like, oh shit, Batman's gonna kill us now, but he won't kill you. He doesn't use guns, but he's gonna beat you up. He's gonna break your nose and stuff like that. You're gonna have to deal with that for a while. It's a wonderful addition to superhero songs, and it already feels like it's established like John Williams' Superman song, or the Avengers song. It already is like, yep, that's the theme.
Yeah, I loved like just a bum, like it reminded me of the Jaws theme song, like where it gets you anxious and then it like ramps up with you. And I loved it. I thought so much of it. Michael Giacchino, just hands down, he nailed it.
And it also works. You know, I hate when they say you have to see movies at a cinema, but there is something about they jack that volume up. It just reverberates in your body. You just sort of feel that terror of fear, and you're like, oh, it's Batman. We're not afraid. We're friends with Batman. We're all bat pals. Like, we know what's going to happen, but we get to experience that, which is so fun.
And you're like sitting in the theater and it starts bumming and you're like, oh God.
Yeah, when we're talking about audio, like, can we just talk about the first appearance of the Batmobile? That was insane.
Oh yeah. Like there was the moment like when the shootout's happening and then everything like stops and they're like reloading and then you hear the boom and like they all look over and you're like, oh no, my goosebumps have goosebumps now. And you're like, oh, so much chills right down your spine.
And I said this to Taylor a couple other times. He is like a Michael Myers. He comes out of the shadows like a serial killer of vengeance, of justice, if you will. But that moment when you see that car, it's like, oh yeah, that's a death-proof car. He's going to run his car into you and keep coming. You know what I mean? There's so many choices that just fit with all of this. It's so funny that we're talking about the car. Do you know the name of the song that plays during the big car chase on the freeway?
Enlighten me.
It is called Highway to the Anger Zone, which is so funny and like a joke within a joke. And I was listening, I was going through the soundtrack before we started because I was like, ooh, what is the movie going to, if I listen to it, will it do? That song's a little zany, a little bit reminds me of the 60s theme song. There's some fun horns, some wild things in there, and it's caught in the background of the cacophony of that scene. But this movie does so many good Batman things. It makes so many smart choices, and it feels like it touches on all those little bits, but like doesn't overdo it.
Yeah. And I think that was probably what I liked the most about this movie. I mean, I had some gripes, and we talked about them the other day. I had some gripes, and they're small. They're like only a couple things that really bugged me about the movie as a whole.
What are your gripes? Because I want to.
I'll just go right into them because like as long as I just say what I didn't like, I can just gush about what I did like.
Okay. I don't like that they called him the world's greatest detective. Alfred solved the cipher, FYI.
Yeah.
And then they were like, he looks at the cage and he opens the bottom tray and he's like, oh, I found this. It's like, you didn't do anything. You just opened that thing. Somebody would have done that.
Right. I mean, that wasn't so to me. The thing that bugged me was the wingsuit scene, right?
Yeah.
When he's coming down and he like that scene was just amazing. But when he pops his parachute and then like crashes into a bridge, hits a bus, and then hits the car and then just walks off, I'm like, I work at a hospital. He would have died. Like on the first impact, he would have been in pieces.
Yeah.
And then he had 2 more impacts.
That's a scene from a Spider-Man movie where
Yeah.
Spider-Man has superhero powers. He isn't a human being. That's too much damage.
Yeah, that part irked me a little bit. I felt like he could have honestly cut the movie down just a smidge they had these very, very long artsy scenes where the camera lingered and you're like, that didn't need to be that way. I'm like, it's giving me anxiety, but it didn't need to be that long of a scene.
I rewatched the third Nolan Batman today, Dark Knight Rises, which is 2 hours and 44 minutes. That movie feels like we are sprinting to get to that storyline, to get all of those pieces in there. And this movie is just long sips of tea. It's like, what are we going to do now? Well, let me tell you.
There's another murder first assault.
There's always another murder to solve. There's always more murders to solve.
Yeah, so I mean, those are the 2 little gripes that I had. Was just that stuff. Otherwise, I kind of loved it through and through. I mean, it was a very good year 1, year 2 Batman story. Like to me, that's what this was. He's not quite firmly in the role he needs to be yet, so he's learning as he's going, but he's still like.
Absolutely, this is year 2. One of the notes I wrote down was, I don't think he thinks he's going to live much longer.
Yeah.
There's a desperateness. The scene when he's with all the police officers, there's a weird standoffishness. First off, he's taking pictures with his eyeballs, which is one of the coolest things to add to a fun, a fun gadget to add to a James Bond guy, which we don't always see. But I also feel like he's like, oh shit, like people are going to, I have to be serious now. Like I'm interacting with people and they're going to be looking at me in this weird way. Because a number of different times, it's like, right, he'll just go until he dies. He's not, Alfred doesn't expect him to live. Alfred's like, right. Please come home. Please eat something. Please take care of yourself. And I like that. I like that desperateness out of him, because at the end of the movie, I feel like he is going to start drinking green shakes and taking vitamins and giving himself me days.
He's going to get a haircut. He's going to see the sun every once in a while.
Maybe once in a while. Well, maybe does that theme resonate with you, that this is what happens when Batman is too into Batman? You know what I mean? He was like so into Batman. It's so early on that Batman's not playing full 3D chess yet. He got manipulated by the Riddler. The Riddler said, oh, you did what I wanted. You put him in the light for me. That's all I needed you to do. Like, the fact that he did that is showing like, oh, Batman is still, he's trying his hardest, but he's got to come at these things from a different direction.
Yeah. And I think that's what made this movie so, and that was something that my wife mentioned while we were watching this. And she's like, this is probably the most human we've seen Batman in a movie. And mind you, I mean, we saw that scene in The Dark Knight Rises where he's going to the hospital and the guy's like, you have no cartilage left on your leg because you've wrecked yourself in 2 years. Like, we had stuff like that, but this was like the most human we saw him, like where he's obsessing, where he's sensitive to the sunlight because he spends all day at night. Like he this was very human. Like he's covered in scars. He's panicking. Like he literally had like a panic attack midway in the movie when he realized what was happening to Alfred. Like, this was a very unique take, a very humanizing take on the character that I don't think audiences were ready for when we first got to this movie.
Yeah, but I'm happy that we have now, both of you are in this world. You probably have watched other DC properties. You've read comic books and cartoons. We already know this Batman lore. I am so happy that the cinematic audience has now been brought into the fact that, oh, maybe Dad Wayne isn't the angel we thought he was. And oh, yeah, Mom's name is attached to the insane asylum that Batman throws everyone in. And maybe the politics of the city are even weirder. And maybe that's why Batman feels a legacy debt. I mean, he's not only trying to work through his own issues, he's like, oh, my dad saved this guy who's killed millions of people. You know what I mean? Or however many people, the Maroney family. They touched on those
25. That's all.
Right. They touched on them in the Nolan movies, but those gangsters in those movies, I don't know. They feel so cartoonish in comparison to everything else, where the Penguin feels cartoonish, but only a little bit. You know what I mean? Everything else feels pretty grounded.
Mhm.
That was one of the things I thought was the most interesting about it, was that for as realism as Nolan pushed into his movies, this movie seemed to almost make that world look more lived in. The Gotham looked lived in, looked dirty. It looked like it was grungy. And I loved the aesthetic for Gotham. They nailed that. But it also felt like this wasn't just pieces of another city. Like,
I totally agree. When I watched Dark Knight Rises the whole time. You're like, oh, that's Chicago, that's Detroit. Like, they do the third Batman movie is very clearly Manhattan Island. They blow up the bridges. The other movie's a little bit darker, but it doesn't feel. This felt like Gotham, and it felt like the darkness they always talk about, like, oh, everyone's corrupt. The city now kind of feels grungy and dingy and kind of worn down, and the rich people aren't around. You know what I mean? He doesn't see them. They're hiding in other places. This Gotham felt very Dark City. It felt very, there's definitely a palette tone of 7 that runs its, sort of the gamut of the whole movie, but it was, for only being in it for so little, it instantly felt at home. And I instantly knew why this Batman acts the way that he does. It is because of this environment.
Yeah, and they always talk about how, like, Gotham is a character in of itself, and I really did feel that in this movie especially. Like, it feels really fleshed out. It's very clear that these people have been around for years. It's like, we're not being introduced to anything that hasn't been around for a long time. And I really like that about the movie, because it felt like for the first time in a live action movie, we've seen Gotham depicted accurately. I think the only thing that came close to it for me personally was the actual TV show Gotham. So yeah, I really like that about the movie too.
Did you guys?
What you said earlier about how they didn't waste a lot of time over explaining things, I really liked how they set the stage with the mayoral debate at the beginning of it. And they were just picking at each other for things about the city, and when they're picking at each other, they're actually explaining and setting the stage of the city. Like, oh, we have this wall that's keeping the water in because Gotham was built, and now there's water rising up through the city. And they start talking about the crime, the trash, and then like all the narration was explaining and setting the stage for you. And in hindsight, when you watch the whole movie, they're literally telling you all of this is going to go down hard as the stories goes on. And it was like they weren't spoon feeding you. If you weren't paying attention, you're gonna miss all of this. And that's what was so cool about the setup. But I want to give credit where credit is due. Colin Farrell, as the Penguin.
Yeah. Listen, he knows where his bread gets buttered, and he gave a performance for the ages, and they only give you a little bit of it, because by the end of that movie, you're like, oh boy, do I want to see more of that Penguin.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually watching yesterday the latest episode of Hot Ones, the interview show with the Hot Wings, and Colin Farrell was on it. He was talking about how this was the most liberating role.
Even hotter questions. Oh, yeah. Talk about him being liberated.
He said that he said normally, like, he said that he always kind of puts himself in all of his roles. That's just kind of how he is. But when he put on the prosthetics, it was the first time he had that barrier between himself and whoever was in front of him, so he could actually be whoever he wanted to be and be the character he wanted to be. And that's what allowed him to fully immerse himself into this character. And honestly, I was watching it, and like my wife leans over and she's like, there's no way that's Colin Farrell. And I'm like, listen to his voice. And she's like, that doesn't sound like Colin Farrell. I'm like, then look at his eyes. His eyes are the only thing that looks like Colin Farrell here.
And also, read between the lines of what he said. He wasn't a beautiful man on screen. People weren't looking at him going, oh, look at that beautiful man on screen. Why does he have to be a mob boss? No, he was disgusting. He was ugly. He was ugly on the inside and on the outside. I absolutely know why this man is in a life of crime. Look at him. He looks like he's been in a knife fight or two. You know what I mean? He looks like he's bitten someone's nose off before. Yeah, he did a great job.
He's got that gnarl across his face. Yeah, he's had some city miles on him.
Now, I'm going to say something controversial here. I think Paul Dano hit a home run, but I think Paul Dano hits home runs all the time. I think he serviced the character very well. In my opinion, I am a Pat man. I'm a Pat man. I'm a Batman now. Pat killed it. I wasn't worried about Bruce Wayne stuff. I was worried about Batman stuff, and nope, I'm not worried anymore. He can be Batman as long as he wants to be. I'll watch him skulk around that city. He'll add more gadgets to himself for the things he can't do. He has a face that looks punchable. Dudes punch him the whole time. I am down with him. I am a Batman. I'm a Batman now.
I was honestly so caught off guard by how well the casting for every character was. Like, and the obvious chemistry between Batman and Catwoman.
Yeah.
Like, my wife a few times is even like, were they dating in real life? I'm like, no, they've known each other for years, but they may be. Like, it was super convincing. It was very well done.
Yeah, that one scene where he's like, yeah, look at me real quick, and then they're like staring at each other for like 15 minutes or 15 seconds, and I was just like, this is like really good. I really like the chemistry they had.
Yeah, and it's a total power dynamic because she's only attracted to the Batman. It is that power that she is attracted to, and there's the great chemistry there. When she does the same thing to him, he doesn't know whether to kiss or not. She does kiss him, but then the third time she goes, nah, brah, I'm out of here. I'm not dealing. I'm a regular lady with kicky powers. I got to get out of here.
And I kind of like that he didn't reveal his identity to her in the first movie. It's still a mystery to her.
I loved that. I mean, I loved how she even kind of like knocked Bruce Wayne a couple of times in her comments to him, and he's just like, yeah, I guess so.
He's like, yeah.
He just like let it happen. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing. He's not fully on board with trusting her yet, but he clearly does. But
and he also doesn't know if he wants to be Bruce Wayne anymore. So he's kind of like talking shit like, yeah, that guy is a piece of shit. Like, he wants to be with the cool kids. He doesn't know where he wants to be either. Because like Nolan's Batman would always be like, Bruce Wayne's doing the best he can, and maybe you should ask him. You should ask him later what his feelings are. And like this one,
it's not what you do.
It's not what. Yeah, right. We would never get that out of this one.
Yeah, I dug it a lot, and I mean, let's kind of get into some of the cooler things. I loved the cinematography, the hallway fight scene. Hearing that fight scene that he had with the elevator in the hallway was all practical and done in the fewest takes that they possibly could. Wow. There's no CGI in that scene. It was all practically done, which is just absolutely insane how perfect that scene laid out. And then, of course, the obvious flare shot.
Yeah.
There were so many shots in this movie that were just gorgeous from start to finish.
Yeah, I feel like something that's lost on people that aren't comic book fans is that comic books are art, and those images stand out to us. And this movie had a number of just beautiful pictures made of cinema. And there's different scenes that are going to stand out to everyone. The car scene stands out to people, the redness there. I mean, there's a ton of that stuff, but I mean, yeah, there's some great images here that feel of this world, where a movie like 300 is great, but those are recreating images that you can kind of see. And you know what I mean? Those are Frank Miller's images, and there's some new ones in there as well. Yeah. I was so happy that they were able to bring that view to it and a practical effect, because it makes that world feel so much real. And unfortunately, it means you have to raise the bar with all these other movies. That unfortunately, your green screens are great, but I've had a real problem with these last group of Marvel movies because they've all felt like big little movies. It feels like there's Like Doctor Strange is gorgeous looking, but there's never more than 6 people in a room, and then they go to another room and a spinning room. Captain Marvel, same deal. It's like, oh, she's on this big adventure, and there's never more than 5 people in a room. This movie feels cinematic, and it was also, on top of being a good Batman movie, it was just a good film. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like, there's no caveat or star. It's a good film, period. And it's a good Batman story. It's a really fun Batman story.
Like, I remember when you and I, we saw Batman Begins in theaters back when we were in high school. Or did we were finished with high school at that point, right? Yeah, we were just finishing high school.
No, Batman Begins? I don't think so.
Yeah, that came out 2005, like right after we graduated, like a smidge after we graduated.
That might be one of the last ones I remember seeing with you, because then you would have been did all your young man things.
Yeah, and then I disappeared, left the country, came back, lived in a different state. You know, I found myself.
You found yourself on a basketball court somewhere.
Yeah. But I want to get into the nitty gritty. Like, we said that we loved about this movie, but let's get into the big stuff. The spoiler alert level of stuff that the big stuff. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
So Matt Reeves talked about a scene that he had to delete before he put this movie out, but he said it was a companion scene to another scene, which was this scene.
Right.
Which was the John Doe, the new best friend of the Riddler. And the scene that Matt Reeves said that he cut out was actually a scene where Batman goes to Arkham to talk to a killer, because he needs to profile the Riddler and needs to speak to a killer to get the profile. So he talks to this John Doe that he put away, and the way they apparently made that original scene was like his face would be kind of obscured. It'd be like you just see the smile, and like that was it. Like it was very much like a comic book kind of sequence. And
which is also Batman meeting Batman. He's meeting another man who he can't see his full face. It's Batman meeting Batman.
So, and from what we now know is that this guy is not the Joker yet. This is very much a proto-Joker that is going to become the Joker because of the escalation that Batman has caused now in the city. So it's very much like they did with like Batman Begins, and very much like they talked about this one, the power vacuum and the craziness that's going to now ensue in the city because of Batman doing what he did.
When I was walking into the theater, me and my friend were going back and forth on long shot predictions. And I said, even though this is year 2, I bet we're going to get a bat boat or a bat helicopter. Now, I was completely wrong, but come the third act of this movie, he's going to need a bat boat. Like now he knows he's going to have a water vehicle in case the city gets flooded again.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's really it. But let's jump right into like what's next. I mean, Gotham is flooded. It went full on no man's land. The city is broken. And from what Matt Reeves has said himself, there's a lot of things that he wants to do with the future of this world. But he's being very purposely vague, right? I mean, a lot of scoopers out there, like My Time to Shine, Daniel RPK, they've said kind of the same stuff that I've been saying for a while now, that the next film is very, very much centered on like the No Man's Land-esque kind of thing. And Mr. Freeze is going to play a role, and there's going to be other things like that nature. But until that next movie gets made, we know that there are 2 TV shows coming out, right? One of them is a Penguin show where you actually, he said it's kind of a prequel show where it's Penguin's rise to power, right? So it's going to be a lot of like the stuff that they're probably going to cast Maroni finally and show him and kind of show Penguin take over for that whole business and the drugs and the drip or whatever they called it. But then the other show, up until today, everyone thought it was a Gotham PD show, but now we know that show was kind of dead. So Matt Reeves was on a podcast, the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, which basically said one thing that we're not going to basically do is that we're not doing the Gotham show. He basically described it that it was a show centered around Gordon, and that show kind of died because of creative differences. But that show quickly did morph into something else, which now he's calling, and his quote from the Cyber Nerds podcast from yesterday or today was literally the GCPD thing. That story kind of evolved. We've actually now moving more into the realm of exactly what would have happened in the world of Arkham as it relates to coming off of our movie, right? And some of the characters, again, in their origins that you would, almost leaning into the idea of like a horror movie or a haunted house that is Arkham. The idea of, again, the way that Gotham is a character in the movie, I really want Arkham to exist as a character. So that you go into this environment and encounter these characters in a way that feels fresh. And so in our work on Gotham, that story started to evolve. And it started feeling, wait, we really should lean into this. And that's where it's kind of gone. And he's admitting that Gotham is its own entity and Arkham is going to become its own dark entity. And he's moving forward into that world.
Right. So then the question then becomes, how big do we go? Do we go all of Gotham is under this battle, or the bars are unlocked at Gotham and Batman has to go into the haunted house. Batman has to go in there and literally go fight the devil. Both of those concepts are great. I will tell you though that if these shows are going to be related to this movie in any way, you got to make them up to snuff. Because if they drop the ball with any of these stories, it will have a weird varnishing effect on this as well. Because this feels like so great and fresh and establishing so much stuff that if you're going to hang other hats on this, they need to be solid pieces on their own.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I think that if Matt Reeves doesn't get full on, like he doesn't do the same thing he was doing, doesn't get the same people involved, and kind of maintain that visual continuity at the very least, it's going to feel a lot like Marvel with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where that show didn't quite fit in. And now eventually we have it now where fans kind of don't even treat it like it's part of the canon because it never really quite meshed as properly as it should have. So
if Batman does end up, if this gang war is going to happen, he's got to get a Robin, because the Robin of this movie was Jim Gordon. I mean, they have a great, it's not as funny as Lethal Weapon, but they had some great, like, okay, I got to do this thing with Batman now. Like, okay, that stuff was so great. And as they were doing those scenes, I was like, man,
I need you to hit me. I thought you were going to pull your punches, like stuff like that. Like,
I did. All right, let's see. Do I have a Batman?
I did pull my punch.
I'll get a Batman lined up so I can start doing some Pat quotes in a bit. But like, when I was watching that, I was like, man, we can have a Robin. I don't know how we get somebody to that level to like be able to fight with Batman, but like Batman needs a number 2 person.
100%. I think that's actually where they're leading to. So then that's kind of where I'm going with my next point. So after the movie, if people stayed for the ending credits, you saw the Rata, whatever I'm always so bad at it. The Rata.
URL Rata.
Rata Lata, is that what it was?
I think it was that.
So the website is real, right? And you go on the website, and up until like a couple days ago, you would go through and there would be a series of riddles that would come up, and you would have to answer the riddles. Fans started to answer the riddles, and some riddles led to certain things. Like I got a piece of concept art of like a police sketch of Batman in one of them. I did another set of them, and I got like a bunch of riddles, like Riddler ciphers and stuff. Fans had actually gotten a set of them on the left and translated them within like hours. They nailed this thing down so quickly.
Thank you, Internet. Thank you, Internet, for going to work so quickly for us. Quickly.
And this big one-shot page that they got was, "You think I'm finished, Bat? Perhaps you don't know the full truth. Every ending is a new beginning. Something is coming." And I mean, they're obviously teasing the sequel, right? I mean, Riddler's clearly not gone, so that's pretty rad. But aside from that, fans saw this. After those riddles all started, the website started then dropping these. And it was like, it looked like an IP address as it was leading into the loading. And fans noticed something kind of amazing about these IPs. These 8 different series of numbers coincided with comics. And the first set of comics, right?
Boy!
Right? The first comic was Batman's first appearance where he's fighting the mob. Then there was like the introduction to Batman and Robin. And then there was the first appearance of the Penguin. Then there was the first appearance of Falcone, the first appearance of Riddler, first appearance of Catwoman. Like you had all these comics that were lining up, right? But the biggest commonality of all of it was Robin was front and center on most of them. Right? Robin. Like he was the main plot on a lot of them. And then the last 2, of course, were, and this one was kind of interesting because you had the Two-Face one, but that was an issue of Two-Face where he actually that was the first comic that actually introduced Arkham Asylum. So not
Okay.
just Two-Face, but I mean, the DA is dead, so obviously we're going to get Harvey Dent going to come into play.
Right.
And then the last number, of course, being the release date for the Batman, right? So as you look through them all, they all kind of line up. And they all kind of like fit into, I mean, Arkham, the Night, Gotham IP, Gotham X, Corrections, Arkham, etc. Like they all kind of lined up, right? So these clues are now, fans are just running rampant. Like, okay, so what do we have now? What are the Easter eggs we saw in this movie? We saw a Hush Easter egg, and that was a huge one across the
Taylor started listening to me the other day, and I had to stop him. I'm like, hold on, I was just watching a movie. I saw the Penguin. There was more. Okay, there's the Hush stuff, and then there was even more after that.
Yeah, there was so. I mean, I think the Hush one is a big one because I mean, from the comics we know in the Jim Lee comic Batman Hush, Thomas Elliot was a surgeon whose dad died, and he kind of grew up with Bruce, right? But what we got in this movie was a reporter. The reporter that Thomas Wayne was responsible for the death of, his name was Edward Elliot. So a lot of our fans assumed Thomas Elliot's dad. Right?
There's the connection.
And then, of course, on the big propaganda thing that Riddler put out, it said, "Hush, he's a liar," like across the screen.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Right? Like, it was just hush right there, front and center. Like, people know that, okay, he's probably coming at some point.
But is Hush a movie 3? Because don't we have to introduce? Don't we have to have Joker? Don't we have to introduce? And also, I feel like Joker. I feel like what they would do is we would have a whole movie where the Joker is not the Joker, is fucking up, and then at the end of the movie gets the acid bath.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm down for that. I mean, Matt Reeves even said like this version of the Joker isn't the acid bath Joker. This is the Joker that probably had some congenital disease through his whole life, where he just can't stop smiling, and then he's become twisted from his outlook of the world because he can't stop laughing and smiling.
I would love a Joker like the one from Telltale. I think that's like an interesting take we've never seen in live action before, and it would set him apart from the other previous ones we've seen.
I'll even take a half-leaf Heath Ledger. Cut half of his mouth or something so that the smile is different in some way. But his mouth, he got in a weird accident, and the kids also, used to call him Mr. Smiley or something like that.
Yeah. Honestly, like, there's so much, but people asked him flat out, like in the interviews now that the movie's out, people are asking him, like, hey, is Hush happening? And he actually answered. They asked him, like, what kind of villains do you want to use? Is Hush one of them? He's like, there's so many. I think Hush is a really interesting one to do. They're just, I'll choose Hush, for instance. But that doesn't mean the next one will be Hush. I just want to say that there are so many villains, and what we would do next is what we're going to do next. If we have that opportunity, it's still in the planning stages and a lot of ideas. So please don't latch onto them saying we're making a Hush movie. So he kind of like stumbled his own words, like, yeah, Hush is great, but don't quote me, but Hush is really great. So he kind of like, Hush is on his mind, right? And
do you think we go right to, as you're saying this, of like, hey, we're building up to things? Do you think we get the Robin that dies? Do you think they're going to go right past Dick Grayson so that we can have the death of Robin on? Because this movie has so many great imagery and we're moving that story forward. That is one of the big, they make these comic book worlds that they have some guy with magic reset everything, but like some of the tent poles of the Batman story is, I mean, the death of that Robin affects so much of his character.
I think with this one, they can definitely go any way they want, but everything that I've heard and everything that I've seen other scoopers talk about, I think the most common thing that was out just a few weeks ago was that DC finally let up the reins, and they're going to get 4 different interpretations of Dick Grayson on the physical media soon. We're going to have Dick Grayson in the Batman Reeves-verse. We're going to have Dick Grayson in the Titan show. We're going to have Dick Grayson on the CW, and we're going to have Dick Grayson in the Batgirl movie. So, like, we know that Dick Grayson is going to be the Batman's Robin, first Robin, and you kind of got that vibe that you're going to see this Batman like how he was with the mayor's son. He just kept staring at him like, this kid needs my help, but he has his mom, so he's okay. But you can easily see that if Batman witnesses Dick Grayson's parents' death, he's going to be like, I have to help him. Like, that'll pull out this like mother bird moment for him. And he's going to be like, I have to make sure that he doesn't go through what I do. Like, you already see that in the groundwork that they made in the first movie.
Yeah, especially if they make like Dick, like they change how Dick Grayson's parents die, and Dick pushes some kids out of the way of a speeding car and the car creams into it. You know what I mean? Something like that where he can feel guilty about it. And then Batman's the only person that's like, listen, I actually understand what it's like to lose your parents.
Well, I mean, they're 100% going to still use the circus approach. I mean, the circus approach was super big with the mob stuff. And you can see that obviously Penguin's going to probably have some factor in it because the whole mob angle with the circus. But what's probably going to be is that he's going to see the guy show up. He's going to see the guy threaten him and he's not going to say anything. And then he's going to feel guilty for not warning his parents that that guy was there tampering with the lions or something, right?
Right.
You're probably going to get something of that nature. But people asked, again, flat out, Matt Reeves, what's going on with Robin? He had a very lengthy response. And his response is kind of a telltale like response in itself. Like they said, are you going to be using Robin? What's happening with Robin? He says, maybe. We'll just say maybe. I don't know. Here's the thing. I have a lot of ideas of what I want to do. I'm not sure what the next story is, but for me, whatever the story is going to be, it's going to be to take these characters and put them in some kind of emotional jeopardy. So when you talk about what you're talking about, there may be a really interesting story. They'd have to be emotional stakes to get drawn into that character's story. And I don't want that character to become a cipher. I don't want it to be like, oh, so we saw it wasn't an origin tale, but it's kind of Batman's origins and he's just perfect. No, you need to test the character again and again. And for me, yeah, there might be something in that. I don't know. There's a deep dive that already happened in the beginning. And now I'm going to have to deep dive again. If we have that chance to make another one, we shall see. Like he basically says like, oh, maybe. But if we do, Robin would be a great way to show Batman growing. It'd be a great way to show his mental state in a different light. Like he's basically saying, yes, Robin is maybe, but Robin's going to happen. Maybe Robin's going to happen. Like he was kind of like dancing around it.
The public was very clearly afraid of Batman in this movie.
Yeah.
And it's really only the last scene when they begrudgingly go along with him because the world is flooding around them. We have to see that happen. And maybe the next character Batman courts is Gotham City and the people of Gotham City, because he's gone after the shadows and we've seen where that's gotten him. Not good. He's now being manipulated into plots with them. You know what I mean? And he wasn't necessarily aware of those things. And maybe we run into a bunch of characters then. We run into a bunch of people that we don't know which way the wind is going to blow with any of that stuff. I also don't want him to get pigeonholed into doing a Robin story because I don't necessarily feel this film set up that or wanted to go there. He's still figuring out how to be Batman and soon to be Bruce Wayne. So I'm fine with that going on as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of feelings toward them using Robin. I do want to see them use Robin, but I want it to be done in a way that's not wasteful. I want them, to obviously deal with the no man's land of Gotham City, where Gotham City is broken, it's being repaired, and you got the crime is like now soaring and ripping up and becoming more rampant. I want that to be a good focus, but I also would love to see this part 2 come about with Bruce now reemerging himself into the city, and now he's maybe the Playboy Bruce kind of starts, but I would very much like this. I would like them to introduce Robin to like say, okay, Bruce Wayne is coming out of the shadows because he saw a kid have something similar to him. Like I want them to acknowledge that he's trying to grow as a person, and I think it'd be great. I think it would be, especially if they do it correctly, not like Batman Forever where Bruce Wayne adopts a 17-year-old kid. Like I want Robin to be a kid, like a 10-year-old.
I am a Val pal. I do like Batman Forever. That for whatever reason, that movie just hits hard at all of my nostalgia things. But I totally get it. Yeah, they always force that father-son relationship on Batman and Robin, where when he's 22, you're not my dad. Like there's nothing you're gonna do, which is very different than if it's 12 or it's Hollywood. So be 18, but he's playing 15, or maybe you get like a real Tom Holland guy, so he looks much younger. I don't know how they want to play it. I would even be fine if they wanted to go real young. And also, it's kind of fucked up that Batman has a child soldier, right?
Yeah.
Like that
Mhm.
kid that he just like, he's like, oh, you could do some flips? Okay, ready? I'm going to teach you how to kill a man now, but we don't kill. But I'm going to show you how to take him down, but we don't kill him.
I think what probably makes it the best idea is, I mean, Matt Reeves took a lot of inspiration from The Long Halloween. So let him take all the inspiration from the sequel, Dark Victory.
Yeah.
And in that story,
I don't know Dark Victory. What happens in Dark Victory?
so in that story, it's the sequel to Long Halloween. There's more mob stuff. The villains are now the supernaturally stuff is coming about. The Robin situation happens very early, and Robin is only like 9 or 10. And he's angry at the world, and he's after vengeance. He's like, I'm going to go get these people. And like Batman is like, no, you're not going to do this. Not happening. And he keeps like steering away from it until Robin eventually like finds the Batcave and like accuses him of being a hypocrite. Like, you could have trained me. You can help me. You can help me get my revenge. And he's like, no, I'm giving you a different path. We're not doing this. Until eventually Robin steals like a bunch of his tech and just goes out and does it himself. And then Batman's like, if you're going to do it, let me at least show you how not to die.
Right.
And like, take it that angle. I think that's a lot better of an option where you're like, I can't stop him, but I can at least make sure he's safe when he's doing this nonsense. Because Batman is flawed. I mean, he is very much a sociopathic kind of a person. So in his mind, if he can't stop something, at least let it help him.
Yeah, and I think we just have to be aware that you can't have me. I'm not a babysitter, Taylor. I'm not going to babysit babies, okay? I need much older Robins. I can't be a babysitter. I listen to Nirvana. I live a tough life. I'm Batman. I'm a Batman, okay? I'm not going to, I can't babysit everybody. I need Batman to grow up as well if he's going to get a kid. I need to feel like he is more stable in his life, because you can't bring a kid in that apartment. A kid's going to poke his eye out. There's pointy corners everywhere. That's not a kid-friendly apartment.
I mean, Batman grew up there, so I mean, maybe it's a little
Yeah,
rough on
and look how fucked up Batman is. Point proven. You gotta put some baby blockers. You gotta put those things so Robin can't open the cabinets. You don't want him getting into the where all the chemicals are.
He's 10. He's not a toddler, so I mean.
Do we want? We're talking about great performances. New Alfred is great. Alfred looks like he can throw a punch. He's gonna hit some dudes with that cane, and we're gonna clap in the theater and be real happy when he does it.
Yeah, I think, and COVID was a big factor in this one, especially COVID and the fact that he was filming Venom 2 at the same time was why Andy Serkis was so busy. But honestly, I think I would actually really like to see, if they introduce a Robin, I would like to see him basically like, you have to grow up for the sake of this boy. And now I want to teach this boy what I taught you, but I want to teach him in a way that I want to fix your errors. Like, he's like, I want to teach you, like Batman's like, I want to teach you how to fight. And he's like, no. Let me show you how to throw a real punch. Like, he gets in it. Like, I want to see more of that dynamic, because that scene in the hospital, that was a hard scene to watch.
Yeah.
And it was a really great scene where Batman basically describes, like, I mastered fear, and then it all came back when I thought you died. And like that was a very powerful scene that we never really got before.
Yeah.
So I want more of that. I would love to see more emotional weight.
In Nolan's third Batman, where they're very trying to set up a Robin story as hard as they can, Batman keeps telling him, I don't wear this mask to protect me. I wear this mask to protect the people I love. So, you know what I mean? And it feels like Batman's inner circle of personal connections is going to grow. Maybe we see some of those relationships, right? But I feel like obviously the relationships he does have in his life, he's going to double, he is going to get closer to Gordon. Maybe we see, maybe Gordon actually knows the truth of Batman a little bit sooner than what he usually does.
Maybe, yeah. And I'd be okay with that. I mean, I would like the idea of Gordon finding out and being like, okay, now I really have to like buckle down and protect this guy, because he's risking everything. He is the top of the top, and he's risking everything. And I know that I see some of the comments. I see a lot of people asking about this. There was one thing that I was really surprised that they kind of teased, and then even Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson talked about, and that was the Court of Owls.
Yeah.
And it was a small tease in this movie where you had when the Riddler has his like video of bashing Gotham, he made this off comment about the powerful founding families of Gotham running the show.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, Okay. And I could very much see, now that the mob has basically been dismantled and the crime network that was going through the DA and all that stuff has been destroyed, I could easily see the court coming in and saying, we let him do what he was doing for 10 years and it ruined the city. Let's take over. And then the owls start doing their thing.
I also like the idea of Batman punching rich people, because, you know, Gotham always seems to be the victim of all of this corruption, and it's the little people that get hurt. I would love for Batman, because of Bruce Wayne, who can get into that world, really see him have to lean into that and really bring all that down.
And it would also kind of add more to that whole narrative with, is Thomas Wayne truly the White Knight of Gotham? Because in the Court of Owls, the main Talon was the illegitimate son of Thomas Wayne. It was Bruce's older brother. So that would be a very interesting dynamic too, if they introduce the court and they introduce Thomas Wayne Jr. I'm pretty all for that, especially because Matt Reeves loves emotional turmoil, and we got this whole movie where, like, the second half of the movie, he's emotionally wrecked because he thinks his dad's a monster.
Yeah, we would spend the first half of the movie where they do like brother stuff, and like, right, he'd be like, hey, his brother would do something and like Bruce Wayne would help cover it up, or vice versa. His brother would help Bruce Wayne like make something go away, and he's like, I've never had this before. And he's like, listen, family means never saying no, and I will always be here for you. And then we have that scene when he's like, I told you, family never says no, right? Like all of that, that's absolutely there. And then we get to see him fight in fun corridors. The more real sets, the better. And if you want to put Robin into that story and they go kidnap Robin, and then Robin has to fight him out, and Batman's like, hey, here's my year one suit. It shrunk in the wash. Put this on. And we see it with some half circus outfit, some sort of vest. Great. Totally for it.
I honestly think, I mean, so like I said, a lot of the leaks and the spoilers and all the scoopers are saying Mr. Freeze is going to be a major player in part 2. And I love the notion that you have an ice-based villain going around a flooded city.
I don't even know how the world felt so grounded, and now you're going to add ice physics to it. Like if they're able to implement it and make it feel cinema worthy, and they're really able to do something with it, well, then they can do magic. Like, why not just have demons start showing up and be like, your father sold the blood debt to me.
No, I think what they need to do is they need to treat it realism. You cannot have this whole idea that you can unfreeze people. Like, if Mr. Freeze freezes somebody, you're
dead. Period.
Period. Like, bar none. Like, I want to see like him freeze someone's arm and their arm is like shriveled and black. Like, I want it to be as real as humanly possible. Oh, like, yeah, Demolition Man did it just fine with ice. Yeah.
Well, you know what? It's funny. What comes to mind is that last Mortal Kombat movie when Sub-Zero and the Jax fight, and he goes after his arms, and we see he smashes his arm. It's like a big explosion. He's like, ah! But like, yeah, you could do something like that. Listen, you're gonna do Sub-Zero, or not Sub-Zero, Iceman, whatever. What do we call Dr. Icy and Batman? What do we call him?
Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze. He's gonna have the genetic problem. He's going to be trying to save his wife. He's obviously going to have some suit that, right, when he's in it, he's really unstoppable. When it's off, like, that's the only way you can get it. But then what is the gun? What is the thing he does, right? Like, does he ice people's blood? What does he do that makes him feel in this world? Because there wasn't, besides Batman hitting that bridge at 1,000,000 miles per hour and not dying, I don't know. There's not too many fantastic things. Maybe when he jumps the car on the freeway. They really got to stop building cars with ramps on them. People just always drive off of, Taylor. They're always going to just drive off those ramps.
No, and it sets people up for failure, because even as a kid, I remember when you and I first got our first cars, every time we saw one of those, we're like, we can make that jump. And we're like, no, we shouldn't. We saw the Dukes of Hazzard. We know it.
Oh, the boys are up to it again.
And that was the jump they couldn't complete. Like, that's what it was. But no, I think if they do something like Mr. Freeze, I would like some sort of science-based, like, he doesn't have some laser freezing gun. There's no metahuman powers. He has a cryo suit that throws like cryo fluid out, and since everything's covered in water, it freezes almost instantly. I want them to be as real as humanly possible with it. and just make it very deadly and very malicious.
Who's the B villain? Who's the other person that we don't need to spend a ton of, like, Catwoman fits into so many Batman stories because he can just run into her. You know what I mean? She's doing something else, so she just shows up there as well.
Honestly, I think they could introduce, I mean, anybody really. I mean, they could, Mad Hatter, for instance, that would be fun. I mean, we already got the Tweedles. That was one of the greatest little Easter eggs in this movie was the Tweedledee, Tweedledum twins. Because you had the two twins. One was Tweedledee, obviously, and the other one was clearly an idiot. So that's Tweedledum. And I'm all for it.
It's funny as well because we were talking like what are the other villains? It's like, oh yeah, there's all these mob families. Like so many of these other villains come from, you know, Joker to some extent is involved in all of this stuff. There's lots of people that are involved with the mob stuff. So maybe we get another family and we see somebody get, you know, treated awful.
Maybe. I mean, I could see them do. I could see them set up a lot, like use the second one to set up the stage a bit. Like we get Mr. Freeze in there, get like the Mad Hatter and a few of the other fantastical kind of a weird villains.
Maybe Scarecrow, if we're bringing in science and like,
Scarecrow would be good. Yeah.
Maybe we see him pass him in the laboratory and he's like, and Mr. Freeze like, you're a psycho, you know? And he's like, you're weird too. And then set up for the third movie.
Like awkward moon dunk.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, we know that Matt Reeves likes a lot of those real villains. He likes Two-Face. I mean, we now have a new DA opening in the city. Let's bring Harvey Dent in. Let's set some of that up.
I was gonna say I think Two-Face would be great considering like all the corruption we're exploring. If they want to go further with that, Two-Face would be the perfect villain for them to go with.
Exactly. Yeah.
And isn't he attached to one of the crime families as well? Don't one of the crime families boost him?
Yeah, the crime family, the Maronis typically owned him for a while, and then the Falcones. I guess, I mean, depending on which comic you read, it's either the Maronis. I was about to say,
I'm going Saturday morning cartoon. I'm trying to remember that one because I don't remember in the Nolan one. He's, you know, the city's White Knight.
I think the best way to do it is kind of like what Geek Breeder here is saying. The Arkham show can introduce a lot of these villains in a very subtle way.
Yeah.
And then just bring them right into center stage in the sequel. Because if you're going No Man's Land, one of the big factors of No Man's Land was the fact that the city kind of delved into like, now there's gangs being run by villains.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's like, this district is owned by the Joker. This district is owned by Two-Face. Like you can go right into that. Like you introduce the villains, have the finale of the Arkham show where the villains break out and just kind of scatter into the city. And then part 2 begins with Batman's like crap.
I want him. Okay, you talked a lot of great stuff, and I know we're talking about Mr. Freeze. I want him to go into Arkham Asylum, and I want it to be like the Raid. I want him to go floor to floor, room to room, fighting dudes. And I know that Matt Reeves said that this wasn't supposed to be an action movie; it was more of a detective movie. You lied to me. Your action scenes were great. Please do more action scenes. You have passed the approval. Give me more and put an emphasis on that.
No, and I love some of the comments in here. I mean, you could introduce Hugo Strange as the guy who runs Arkham. I'm all for that. Black Mask being a new mob family, the Sionis family, that's coming in and taking over with the vacuum of the Falcones. Introduce him. I'm all for it. Like, just give Matt Reeves the keys to the kingdom and just let him use everybody.
And if he also wants to bring some villain from the 30s that had one issue that we don't know anything about, and he wants to make that new person,
give us Killer Moth.
Great, done. You want to bring Catman into canon? Great, make it happen. I don't care. Whatever you want to do, I am down.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I loved it, and I want to see where this world goes, and I want to see as much as I can from Matt Reeves' brain into this universe.
Maybe we're going into Blu-ray releases. Do you think there's an R version? And do you think the R version will hit our eyeballs? Do you think we'll be able to buy the unrated version whenever this releases?
I don't think so. Solely because Matt Reeves said that this was his cut. And the only reason he cut out that other Joker scene was that he wanted the second scene, like the big, like, I'm going to be your friend scene. The only reason he left that in was because he wanted to show the visualization of the power vacuum beginning. So he didn't want it to. He took the companion scene out to make that scene more impactful. Sorry, I'm reading some of the comments. Let's introduce Hardak. Let's have a guy who makes a bunch of robot versions of all the Gotham Elite. That was a messed up episode.
We do it. We do whatever you want to do. Get Metallo in here. Whatever.
The Holiday Killer would be fun. I'd love to see Calendar Man.
I did think we were setting up the Holiday Killer when he said like, "Oh, this is the Halloween." You know what I mean? I was like, "Oh, we're gonna do that storyline." I was like, "Oh, okay." No, we didn't go there. But
yeah,
I wonder. Matt Reeves did such a good job of doing this great horror noir, those influences of Seven in the story. I wonder what other visual lenses he wants to put Batman through, because an Arkham movie as a haunted house is very different, as well as a movie where Batman is going through the city, which almost reminds me of like the 70s movie The Warriors, right? Like Batman goes from one train stop to the next train stop, and in every part of town he runs into another group. I don't think they want to do so brawly with this Batman, but what I would love to see this Batman get put through other genres. And maybe if we do get a Scarecrow or a medicine bad guy, we can start doping these people up and see how they deal with their inner demons as well.
Yeah, maybe. I would love to see Scarecrow spray Batman, and then we see the origin that way. We see his nightmare of his parents dying that way, and like a very twisted version of it, like in the animated show where like he sees them walk into the crime alley and the crime alley turns into a giant gun where they die. Like I want weird. Give me that.
Oh, I'll take it one step weirder as well. And I don't even know why I got this, but for some reason I kept getting, when I was watching this movie, of like, ooh, you know who would fit in this world? Man-Bat, where some disease turns somebody into a giant maniac bat who's ripping people apart, and we have to use some science thing to save it. I don't know. I would love to see, because Batman is the biggest monster in this world. If they give another monster for him to fight, you know what I mean? I don't want Killer Croc, but maybe Killer Croc would fit in this world, and you give him some weird disease.
I don't know. I think he wants to stay away from like those fantastical villains, like things like Man-Bat, Clayface, Killer Croc. You're probably not going to see, but I would love to see all three of them. Let's go.
Do you think we could get a toned down Clayface? Like he like molds, like there's something wrong with his face. He has like alopecia and he can like put prosthetics on and you don't know who he is.
I mean, kind of like just Chameleon from the Spider-Man comics where he just wears like prosthetics to change his face and he can mask his voice. Maybe. But on that note, we crossed the hour mark. So let's give our final pieces. What do we got to say? I mean, what do you want the most? What's your number one thing that you want to see going forward with the Reeves verse?
I mean, going forward, you mentioned like the whole gangs in No Man's Land. I think that's been like my biggest dream for a Batman movie, is just to see like a gang war between all these villains. Just because like we haven't seen a Batman movie with as many villains maybe as like Reeves' movie, for example. We just haven't seen that many villains in Gotham living there together before, but just seeing them come together and like get into a gang war, I think that would be really awesome. Like you mentioned, like Riddler had a gang, Joker had a gang, maybe even like the War of Jokes and Riddles too. That could work too, if they set their cards right, like how they did it with like how you said with the Arkham show. If they set up all the villains through there properly, they can really pull that off. Like maybe as a conclusion to the trilogy.
Maybe, yeah.
The Riddler has to have a gang. And even if Paul Dano doesn't show up, I would love to see his flunkies going around the city and then pop up all over the place.
No, on that note, 100%, because I mean, they said in the movie he had a chat room with 500 followers, and only like 13 of them dressed up like the Riddler and shot up the.
Well, isn't that always the problem, Taylor? You say we're going live, we're gonna do a big episode, and then who knows who's gonna show up? That's just the way the internet works.
Yeah,
I'll tell you, I want time to move forward. We saw Batman Year 2. I would like to move. I know that the city is in ruins right now, so if it picks up right afterwards, like okay, but I would love a full 15 months, and we hear the next movie starts with the monologue where he goes, I've changed, and we see his priorities. I'd like to see I'd like to see things get a little bit more polished. I'd like to see in the I do think this Batman would keep artifacts and souvenirs from these crazy victims. I do think this is the Batman that we see a giant T-Rex and they're like, what's that doing here? And he's like, you don't want to know.
That was a day.
Right. So I would like to see Batman. I'd like to see Batman year 4. I'd like to see Batman year 3.5. I would like to see Batman where he's like, I've got this all figured out and I'm confident, and see him go, oh no, it's more weird than I thought. Yeah.
I mean, the ending set it up perfectly. I'm to kind of echo on that. He said that he now knows he has to become something more than what he was. And
do you think they're setting him up to feel like Superman? Because he's not Superman, but
no,
it
he's
felt
not.
like he's not Superman, but it felt there's like, oh, he's got to be this, the light shining on him now. He's dirty, but he's in the light.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to go full on like, I'm now walking around during the day. But I think that because of the escalation of this, he's probably going to have to move forward in a way where he's going to listen to Alfred and go back to Wayne Enterprises. And then he's going to meet Lucius Fox, and Lucius is going to get him some new cool stuff.
Yep.
I could see, I want just a polished year 2 Batman to become like less in military fatigues and chest plate into more Batman all the way.
Yeah, 100%.
But on that note, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you all for joining us tonight. If you want to support our channel, we do have a Patreon open solely for the podcast. You can head over to patreon.com/theculturednerd. Check out the tiers, the rewards, and everything in between. Thank you again. Host today, myself, Taylor Murphy, my co-host, Michael Santel, and Marcus from TCN's editorial team joining us, which was pretty wonderful.
Thank you, Marcus.
Yes,
our
sir.
Patreon supporters, Wesley H., Oscar B., coming in and always helping us keep the lights on. Again, thank you for joining us, and you can find us on all social media platforms at The Cultured Nerd.
Hold on. Flip back over to us, Taylor. Flip back over to us for a second.
Okay.
We are vengeance. Thanks for joining, everybody. We'll see you next time.
You had to.
I had to.